I actually have a friend who said to me the other day they're thinking about starting a business, and she said, but I'm not like you. I don't know a lot about business. I said, I didn't know anything about business 4 years ago. That's not how it works. And I think we all think that the people a little bit further along the journey from us know it all. And most people are making it up. And most of the time you can find the information you need from somebody, or listen to a great podcast like this, or, watch a YouTube video. Most things you do, you can learn how to do at the beginning. And then as you go, you meet people that will guide you with the other knowledge you need. And when I think about what I thought business was 4 years ago versus what I think it is now, it's night and day, but I had to do all those things to get to this point.
You're listening to Not My First Guess. I'm Hattie Willis, your host, and each episode I talk to an entrepreneur, investor, or startup expert to unpack their hardest moments, biggest wins, and hard-earned advice so we can shortcut our learnings as founders together. Today, I'm joined by Jacqui Patton, founder of Ink Blot Creative. After training as an actress, Jacqui's life took some twists and turns, including an eye-watering stint as the lady behind the number dishing out hair removal emergency advice at Veet before finding her way into the world of marketing. A truly natural and masterful communicator, it's no surprise that a simple yet radically candid conversation with the new CEO accidentally landed her the role of head of comms at RBS International. There she honed her craft, and when life radically shook up her perspective, she decided to take on a new challenge and left the corporate world to forge her own path by starting Ink Blot Creative. Having been a client of agencies for many years, she spent quite a while trying to do what everyone else was doing in the same way they were doing it. But she soon realised the clients she and her team got most excited about were the ones a little bit like them and us, people that are building a growing business and want a helping hand to make it the best it can possibly be. In this episode, we discuss how to avoid the content loop procrastination trap, remembering what you actually do and why, getting obsessed about your customers, not your competitors, finding inspiration from other industries, connecting with your legacy, and so much more. So without further ado, let's get started. Jacqui, welcome to the show. It's so exciting to have you on. We're going to do a shorter episode this time, which means I have to be very disciplined. So we're going to start with your founder story, and you have a bit of a wacky one because you came from the world of acting to entrepreneurship. So let's talk a little bit about your journey, highlights along the way, hard points along the way, and also like entrepreneurship. Did it feel like something you were always moving towards? Does it look like that now in hindsight, but at the time felt like a much messier journey? Tell us your path.
Yes. What a journey. I think that interesting part of your question there is, did it feel like entrepreneurship was the way? And no, it didn't at all. I remember being at school doing my A-levels, and when people are like doing business studies and thinking, why would you do business studies? How boring. I don't want to learn about business. Who does business? And now I'm obsessed with business. And in hindsight, I'm like, I wish I could have gone back and done A-level business studies. But I come from a creative family. My dad was a musician. So when I said, I want to go into acting, I think most families think, what? Don't do that. Whereas my family were like, yeah, sure. Why not do that? That's great. Because it was kind of par for the course for us. But the thing about when you're a jobbing actor, you're self-employed. So I kind of always thought I'd be doing something that wasn't a traditional 9 to 5. And then kind of from that point on, I kind of had a bit of a, not midlife, like 21-year-old crisis, and thought, what am I doing? I don't know if I want to do this for a job. I love it. But, I wanted to start a theatre, and I then realised I didn't have any money to start a theatre. And funnily enough, now, knowing what I know about business, I probably could have got someone to help me fund a theatre, but I didn't know that then. So I kind of was of the mind when I was young that if you didn't have the money in your pocket, you couldn't do it. So I thought, well, I'm going to have to go and find something else to do. And I did every job under the sun. I was an Easter Bunny impersonator. I worked for the gas emergency services line in Melbourne in Australia. That was a great job. I was the lady on the end of the phone if you put Veet hair removal cream somewhere you shouldn't, and you rang the bottle on the tube. Don't know why anyone rings the bottle on the tube. Just ring the doctor. Why would you ring me? It was terrible, but hilarious. I should have written a book about that job. So all these different jobs. But I kept thinking about what are the skills that I have and how could I apply them to a job that's not being an actress. And interestingly, when I was going into the arts, the skills that you need to succeed in those roles were not skills that I was ever told were useful in the rest of the world. But now actually some of my superpowers as a founder and helping business people come from the things I learned in that arena. And very often people will say things to me like, did you know you were good at that? And I'm thinking, yeah, I studied to do that actually. Like I got taught how to do that. But we forget these skills can be taught. So I was kind of all the time thinking, how am I going to turn those skills into a job? And then I was working for this firm and they had a marketing team and a brand team, and I saw what they were doing. And it just kind of clicked for me. I was like, well, it's telling stories, isn't it? And that's what I've learned how to do. I've spent my whole life to this point telling stories, understanding audiences, getting people to feel emotive and come with you on a journey. And that's what brand and marketing is. And when that clicked for me, I was like, I've got to do that. I've got to get into that. How do I get into that world? And that kick-started a very weird and wonderful journey to starting a marketing agency.
I do want some of the Veet horror stories. Can we hear one or two? Just because I think it's going to be jokes.
Okay, one. I had a lady ring up once who had used Veet hair removal wax, intimate wax. And the phone call was, I've put it everywhere. I've managed to get half done. Ladies listening will know what that means. My toddler has got into the jar and is now also covered in it. How do I get the rest of it off because I can't go any further? And we had to have a conversation about like warm water and you have to be very polite and conscientious, and it was a terrible situation, but don't ring the number on the box. Ring your best mate if you're ever in that scenario. That would be my lesson for people.
And there are so many lessons in what you've been doing, that you, as you say, these skills that you pick up on the way. And I think for founders, often it's not the simple story that we tell later when we've hopefully made it and you can see all the links between things. And I love that kind of calm under pressure. I love the fact that you talk about storytelling being such a key skill. I think we undervalue it hugely. And just listening to your introduction, you can tell it's an art. And actually, and it's something founders need to get really comfortable doing, is starting to build these beautiful links between your own journey. So we've started to see this marketing hope, I guess, at the end of the tunnel. What happens next? Because I know you start to pitch yourself in for jobs, and I love the way you went about this. I think it shows something entrepreneurial about you. So tell us the next part of the story.
Yeah, so I think a lot of founders will resonate with kind of doing things before you're ready. And it's a fine line between bullshitting your way into stuff you shouldn't be doing and have no business being anywhere near, and actually thinking to yourself, now I know I could do that. If I could get there and had the opportunity, I could do that. And when you're young, I'm in my mid 30s now, when you're in your 20s, I think, what have you got to lose? I traveled all over the world. I lived in loads of different places. I was doing lots of different stuff, and I was very lucky that my community around me at the time were really up for that. And I had a lot of support to kind of go out, do it. You've got your whole life to sit behind a desk if that's what you want to do. Don't waste these years. So by the time I got to the point of seeing this marketing team, I was kind of in a position where I thought, well, can't be worse than listening to Veet wax stories, can it? So I might as well go and have a conversation. And I think that my mum was a big proponent of don't ask, don't get. She used to say that all the time. If you apply for a job and they offer you £4 an hour, which was my first ever job, £4 an hour, ask for £5. Like, don't ask, don't get. Worst they can say is no, it's £4 an hour. In which case you go, thanks very much, I'll take £4 an hour. But I was always, that was kind of built into me, don't ask, don't get. So I always thought, just ask. And that's what I did. I went after it. I said, I reckon I could do that. I reckon I'd be really good at it. Bearing in mind, before I got this job, Subway had told me, they didn't want me to make sandwiches. So I'm thinking, well, I just need a job. I reckon that would be good. And I went in at the bottom. And I've always thought that every job you do, it's not just the role you're in, is it? It's about the people around you. How are the people running the team operating? How are the people running the business of the team you're in operating? What could you learn? What rooms can you get in? What conversations can you listen to? And talking about kind of superpower skills, storytelling, I think, is a really big one for founders. Another one is being able to ask the right questions at the right time. And a lot of my job as a service provider is asking the questions that get the people we work with to give us the answer we need to do our job well. And I think that there's a fine line between telling your story and listening to what you need to know to tell the right story. And, we talked before we started today about talking about tips for founders, and I'm going to throw one in now because it feels like it's an appropriate moment. Very often I'll meet founders. I actually went to a networking event last night and everyone goes, so what do you do? And people talk at you, don't they? Throw a story at you. The best conversations are people that ask questions about you and then tell the story that fits you so that it makes sense to you, so that they're dialing in. So as an example, if I said, we were having a conversation about you, I'd be able to talk about what I did in a way that you understood, because I now know enough about you to flex the story. But we don't do that. We just cookie cutter it. And if you're stood up in front of investors or you're at an event talking to other founders, that story won't be told in the same way. Just because you've practiced your elevator pitch and you've got it nailed, it's not the same story. So I ended up getting a role, really junior, super low level trade marketing role. And then I got into brand management with some health and beauty brands, again, trade marketing. And that was super fun. And then I got divorced at like 25. It was a ride. And I ended up in Jersey in the Channel Islands, which is where I'd grown up. I left there when I was a teenager and I went back and I winged my way into another job that I probably had no business in. So I ended up doing a project management role in a trading floor. And I don't know if anyone watching can guess, but I'm not your typical trader. And I remember on my first day, I was working on an interest rate hedging remediation project. And they gave me a book on interest rate hedging. And I remember going home and reading it and thinking, I've got to figure out what this is because I've got to talk to people about this tomorrow. And I did figure it out. And I went and I did the project. And then they got a new CEO at the bank. And one day he met me and we got chatting. And he was like, what the hell are you doing in that room with all those very clever people talking about money? And I kind of said, I don't know, I shouldn't be doing that. Let me go and talk to people about things. And we had a really great conversation. I told him this story. And a few weeks later, he came back to me and said, our head of comms is moving on. Would you like to be the head of comms for the bank in its offshore jurisdictions? And I remember the conversation because I said to him, I would love that job. Please, can you tell me what that job is? And he said, sure. And if you're shit at it, we'll get you a different job. And again, an opportunity. And I think that it's this founder story thing, isn't it? A lot of the time, it's easy to say, well, I was just really good, so I got that job. Absolute rubbish. If I hadn't have met him that day and had that conversation that day, and that person hadn't have been going to do another job, and he hadn't have thought, actually, she's quite funny, maybe we'll try her out, I'd have been on a completely different career path. It was just complete luck. But also, I guess, a little bit of vulnerability to share that with him and talk about what I could do and be open to pitching myself a little bit. So I ended up running comms for a bank in 7 countries, which was nuts. And another opportunity to see how a big business operates.
And you're so right. Like, they often talk about kind of luck is opportunity meets preparedness. And I think we don't talk about that preparedness being about being ready to be open and honest and share. Love that. Okay, so we've got from Veet to head of comms internationally for a big bank by telling the CEO of the company that you don't really know what you're doing in your job. Love that as a journey. So what's next?
So I think what's interesting, I had a conversation last night at this networking event I went to, and people say, what did you do before you were an agency? And I said, I was the head of comms for a bank. And they go, oh, did you hate corporate? Is that why you left? And I loved my corporate job. And it was the first corporate job I'd ever really had. And it was my first time ever working in finance. And I come from Jersey, which is a financial centre where most people work in the finance industry, and therefore most people don't like the finance industry because that's how it is, isn't it? We never like the thing we've got where we are. And I thought I'd hate it because it's a boring office job, isn't it? But I loved it. I got to build a team. I reported into the CEO, who was one of the cleverest people I've ever met in my life, and I learnt so much from him. And he was so giving of his time and his knowledge. The exec team were nuts. I got to work with the board in the UK. I got to travel. I got to experience loads of stuff I would never have done if I hadn't have done that job. And they trained me, and I got lots of qualifications while I was there. And they sent me to do things that really helped me personally and professionally. So it's a hard one, but I got to a point with that role where what's the next thing? And the next thing was maybe going and running a different department in the bank or going into a different part of the bank to do something similar. And I didn't want to do something different because this is what I love. And I didn't want to go somewhere else. So I was, what am I doing? And by this point, I'd had conversations with my boss saying, I think at some point I will probably be self-employed. And fair dues to him. He was like, so what do you need to know to be able to do that job? What could you learn right now in this job that could you go and do that for the next year? And not many bosses do that. Incredible man. And then really sadly, my dad died unexpectedly. He had a heart attack one day while making the bed, of all things. And again, it's strange how the universe lines things up. If I'd have been self-employed when that happened, that could have killed the business. But I was working for a bank, so I got a chance to, I took time off they were very good about just go, just have your time, come back when you're ready, you know, don't worry about us kind of thing, which was fantastic. So that's exactly what I did. And then I came back after 6 weeks, but then sadly my mum died within a couple of weeks of that, also unexpectedly. And at that point they were like, go again. And I think kind of after that, I was getting to a point where I was like, what am I doing here? You know, the old life is short adage kind of hits you in the face when something like that happens. And again, universe opening doors. I turned up back at work, and at the time I thought, what did I do in a past life for this to be the scenario? I walked in and they went, we're going to restructure. And I thought, you can't restructure my job. I've literally just been through the worst year of my life. But then there was a little moment of, oh, hold on a minute. Could that be the moment to go? Because actually there might be a redundancy. There might be an opportunity to help shape that a little bit. And that's exactly what happened. So I ended up on a very long run in knowing I was leaving, which was quite odd, being in, I think it was almost 8 months, knowing that I was going to go, but I was still there doing the handover and everything. And then, yeah, I kind of walked out into the big wide world at the very end of 2019 thinking, the world is my oyster and it's all going to be great. And then Corona hit.
Not sure where to pick up the mic from that. I mean, so much in there. You know, we've talked about losing parents before and how it can just give you this very different perspective. And I can't remember if I've often said this to people, and I find you tend to sit on one or two sides. I got really pissed when people used to tell me there's a silver lining to everything, or like everything happens for a reason. I used to want to punch them in the face. If you said that to me before, I wanted to punch you in the face. But I really do also agree with what you're saying, which is that these things do give you a totally different perspective. And I remember thinking after I lost my mum, like, she never made it to retirement. I might never make it to retirement. That does change how you see the world and how you see how much time you have to do what you want to do with it. But I didn't have your series of events, which is just, you must have genuinely felt cursed. How do you, and I love that your attitude is to go and like pick yourself back up and be like, I'm going to take this opportunity. How do you prepare then in this long run up to leaving? Like, how do you prepare to leave and start your own company, but also like look after yourself in that process, because you've just gone through this shitstorm, for want of a better phrase, and then you get hit by another shitstorm, which is kind of global, but you're now in COVID having launched a business. Like, how, when you talk about founder resilience, I mean, you've clearly got it in spades, but like, how do you go through that chunk of time?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I think it's funny what you say about people saying there's always a silver lining. And I think there is always a silver lining, unless it's a horrific, life-changing, traumatic event, in which case it's just really shit. And, you know, just as a side note, if anything like this ever happens to anyone you know, the best thing you can say is, that's really shit. Not, I'm sure they're in a better place, or I got that one a lot, and at least they're together. I'm thinking, thanks, but I'm not. Cheers very much. But, you know, people say what they think will help. I think resilience is a really interesting thing. And a lot of people said, you know, I don't actually very often talk about my parents. Well, I talk about them all the time, but I mean the fact that they're not around, because I didn't want my story. I don't mind talking about it now. I'm kind of 4 and a bit years into my business. It's a big part of who I am. I never wanted my story to be, her parents died, so well done her. Yeah. That's my worst nightmare, right? And actually last year, there's a grief awareness day. And I did a post on social media about the fact that you never really know what people are going through. Like, just be kind. And I kind of shared a little bit about my parents, and the messages I got from people, oh my God, I didn't know. But almost as if, oh my God, I didn't know. If I'd have known, I would have done something different. And you think, but that's the point, isn't it? Just don't be a dickhead, because you never know. And, you know, you might meet someone one day and they're a bit brash, or they're a bit off, or they're not as energetic as you want them to be, and you have no idea what's going on in their life. So I think that resilience comes from, you don't really have another choice, and you know the feeling, right? But how are you doing it? Well, you have to do it. What's the other option? Lie in bed and cry all day? There's only so much of that you can do, and I did a lot of that. But getting through that period of kind of knowing I was leaving, and it was such, do you know what it was? It was such an ego bruising time for me. I knew I was going, and it was a choice to go, but I knew there was a perception in the business because people didn't know I knew I was going. Even now, people will say, oh, it was such a shock when they let you go. And I thought, well, it wasn't to me because I knew I was going. But obviously, one day it just gets announced and then you disappear. And watching the team I'd built be restructured and not being a part of it. And then you leave something that's been a big part of your life for a long time. And then you're outside of an organisation. It's hard because it feels like a disconnect from a community. But in terms of how I went from that to starting a business, the reality is Google mainly. I'd think, right, okay, if I was going to start a business today, what's the first thing I need? Right, I need to register it. How do you do that? Google it. Right, okay, next I need to name it. Right, come up with a name. Okay, what do you do once you've got a business name? Google it. Okay, what am I going to need to do accounting-wise? Or Google it, find an accountant. Okay, and I literally did that. I made myself a list and I just checked it off one by one. I actually have a friend who said to me the other day, they're thinking about starting a business. And she said, but I'm not like you. I don't know a lot about business. And I said, I didn't know anything about business 4 years ago. That's not how it works. And I think we all think that the people a little bit further along the journey from us know it all. And most people are making it up. And most of the time you can find the information you need from somebody or listen to a great podcast like this or, watch a YouTube video. Most things you do, you can learn how to do at the beginning. And then as you go, you meet people that will guide you with the other knowledge you need. And when I think about what I thought business was 4 years ago versus what I think it is now, it's night and day, but I had to do all those things to get to this point.
And I think that's so true. And actually, if you know founders and you've seen a founder go through it close hand, you realise they are just learning as they go. But if you're coming new to it, you assume everyone got a handbook you didn't get. And if it's helpful for anyone listening, my company, If We Raise, has created a free first-time founders roadmap. And it doesn't cover the stuff that you can just Google, like how to register your company. It's more about how to test your ideas smarter, avoiding some common mistakes we've talked a lot on about the podcast. So not an ad, it's a free resource. But if it's useful for anyone who's feeling like a little bit of that overwhelm, feel free to go and check it out. We'll put a link in the show notes. Okay, so we come to the company and the company is all about marketing. So I kind of want to move into like stage 2 of the podcast and start talking about what founders need to know about marketing. Because as you say, like it's actually one of the things you don't get the playbook for, but you're suddenly having to do. You don't know why people are saying yes or no to your company. You don't know really how to reach them and you're trying to make a load of guesses. So what would you tell a founder starting out on their journey? What do they need to get right early, and what should they not be worrying about at the beginning when it comes to like marketing, thinking about their own story? Because I think we obsess about the wrong things sometimes.
Massively. So I talk a lot about something that I call the content loop, which is this loop we get stuck in where we want to do the fun bit, where we want to create content and design logos on Canva, and spend 3 weeks coming up with a name for a company and all this stuff, because it feels like we're moving forward. But we're not. We're procrastinating. It's a procrastination technique. Anyone that spent 3 hours on Canva looking for the perfect font or picture for a post knows that it's a procrastination technique, right? So my biggest tip at the very beginning is to simplify. You need to get out of your head and get out of all of this. I read 7 marketing books, and the problem with marketing is there's too much information. We have thousands of podcasts, events, YouTube channels. Everyone in the world's a marketing expert, whether they've done it for themselves or other people, regardless. And we really need to get to a point where we're thinking about what we're trying to achieve. What is the end goal for the business? Not for your marketing. What is your business's objectives in the next 3 months, 6 months, say a year? And then what do I need to do to get my business there with the help of marketing? We also get confused between marketing and brand, right? We think that they're one and the same. We then ignore sales. We just don't want to do that bit because that's hard and difficult. So I always like to think of marketing, brand and sales as symbiotic relationship. Your brand is how people know who you are, how they differentiate you, how if you walk down the high street and there were 10 shops all selling the same thing, your brand is what tells them what makes you, right? It's the shop front that lets them choose. Then the marketing is the stuff that gets them to know that's where your shop is and what's in your shop and why they should go in the shop to begin with. And then the sales is what you do once they're in the door, right? It's how you get them to buy the thing. What we often do is spend a lot of time worrying about the brand. We then get the marketing and I was saying to somebody the other day, it's like flicking spaghetti at the wall. We just do it until something sticks. And then we go, that worked. And then the next day we do something different. And what are we doing? that thing there just worked. Just keep doing that thing. Why are we doing something different? And it's because most entrepreneurs are magpies. We're full of ideas. We're full of excitement. We've got all these things going on. It's like, this melting pot of stuff. And marketing is like crack cocaine, because we've got all these ideas and it lets us unleash them rather than thinking about it in an analytical, strategic way. What do I need to do to get to the goal? So then, once you've got them, how are you going to sell it? And that can be, how you talk about what you do at an event. It can be your pitch deck for an investor. It can be how easy is it for them to give you your money. If I go on one more website where I can't hand my cash over without going through 7 stages of UX, it drives me nuts. Sales is about getting the money through the door, but we don't do them all in a sequence. So I would always say, start with the objective in mind. What are you aiming for? Break it down. Make it really simple. You don't need on day one a website, 4 functioning social media channels, a newsletter, print media, something on a bus. You don't need to be doing events. You don't need to be on podcasts, on webinars. You just need to do the thing that will get you to your objective the most effectively and the most efficiently. And you need to do it for long enough to see a result. You can't do it for 2 minutes and then when it doesn't work, go, it didn't work. I did it for 3 days. Nobody knows what we're doing, so we're going to try something else. You have to, the people that, this is something I've learned. I have a post-it note on my laptop that says simplify, because that is my mantra for this year, simplify. And I've learned definitely as I've moved along in business, the businesses that succeed are the ones that are happy to do the boring stuff over and over again. But the challenge with entrepreneurship is a lot of us want the fun. We want the fun and the excitement. A lot of us want to start stuff, but we're not always finishers. So we need to get used to the fact that sometimes we have to just be repetitive. We have to talk about the same thing. We have to keep hammering home the message, because that's really what our audience need. And then once you've done that, you can check the data. You can see what's working. What is sticking? Do more of it. What didn't stick? Do less of that. And repeat. And it's not sexy. And it's not what all the marketing books tell you. And it's not what all the podcasts tell you. But it's the truth. And it's the reality of what you need to do well.
And you're so right, because we talk about experimenting with different channels, but you've got to set that experiment long enough for it to work. And then I definitely feel personally attacked / personally coached, and I'm going to choose to see it as personally coached, because this point of, we're finding it with If We Raise, it's a standing joke. My co-founder and I are both startup coaches. He's an experienced founder, exited angel, and we still fall into common traps because it's easy to do when it's your own company. Webinars working really well for us, getting, people to learn about what we do. What do we do when they start working? We're like, oh, cool, webinars, tick, next. And now we're back to webinars because they work really well. Who knew? I love that, and so much to take from that. So, and I love the analogy of breaking down sales, marketing and brand, and really understanding how they can't work independently, and also not getting obsessed. And I think it is so natural as well, because especially if you quit the company you work for, friends and family are asking what are you doing? I want to show you something. I want it, feels so good, and it's so natural. Of course it is. My grandma was texting me this morning asking me to buy her jigsaws and basically asking why I've not been to see her in ages. Guilt trip. And I was like, sorry grandma, I started a new company. It's like a year ago, she just doesn't know. And she's like, I didn't realize you had a new company. So I sent her the website, and I felt a bit better for it for a moment, because I was like, I can show you I'm not ghosting you for no reason. And I think we kind of want to do that. Yeah, and I want to be able to show friends and family why I'm ignoring them, and I want to be able to reassure whoever it is that's maybe a bit worried about us that I'm not taking a totally stupid route and building something real. So what else do you think goes a little bit wrong for founders and marketing, and what goes right? Who have you seen do it really well, and what are maybe some things that founders could learn from those who do get it right early on?
So in terms of the things that I think people need to focus on, there's 2 common conversations I have all the time. One of them is an inability to explain what you're actually selling. And I have a lot of conversations. And again, it's because at the beginning, you're conceptualizing. It might not be real yet. You might not actually have the thing. If it's a product, it might not exist. It's in your head. Or if it's a service, you might be thinking, when we get to this point, we're going to sell this service. So we conceptualize it. And we get hung up in personal brand and this idea of I've got to have a story to tell. But we create a story, but we don't actually, what is it I'm selling to you that we don't, and it can be hard, right? It's hard to say to somebody, hey, I'm Jacqui, I run a strategic content marketing agency, and that means that if you worked with us, we do X, Y, Z. that's quite a hard thing to do, because then they go, oh, cool, could you do that for me? And you have to do it. And that can be quite like unnerving at the beginning. Or you don't want to say you do it if you've not done it yet. That's like a hard bit when you're starting out. So I would always say to people that you need to get out of this, go back to your value proposition. Who are you serving? What is it you actually are selling to them? What is the product or service? What are the benefits and features of that? And how does it add value? And once you understand that, you will be able to articulate your business everywhere so much better. And it's important that we understand why you as a founder are doing it. And it's important that we understand the backstory, and it's important all of that. But they also need to know what it actually is. And I often, when I meet founders at events, I won't ask, what do you do? I ask, so what do you sell? And most people go, because I know they're thinking, shit, I don't know, because I've not been asked that question, because they're about to go into an elevator pitch about what they do. And I think it's a really useful tool, a thing to think about. The second thing is that very often we get caught in spending a lot of money so that people will see something, and we tell ourselves we are researching the market and looking at our competitors because it's the right thing to do for our market research. And then we get into this like mind roll of, what are they doing? Why are they doing that? Should I be doing that? Oh my goodness, that's a bit like what we do. Should we be talking about that thing the way that they're talking about that thing? Oh my goodness, are they doing the exact same thing as us? Does that mean that my business now is not viable and we lose it? Now, competitor analysis is an incredibly important part of your business planning, your business modeling. It's a really important part of your marketing. Please unfollow every competitor on Instagram. Stop looking at their LinkedIn posts. They are not your customer. So many founders get obsessed with the competition, and I want them to get obsessed with their customers and who they're going to serve, because you need to know them inside out, not your competitors. So I kind of often say to the people we work with, when we're doing strategy at the beginning of the year, mid-year, end of year, we will look. Outside of that, get your head in the game and think about what you need to do. And that kind of leads me on to things I think that people do well. I was listening to a podcast the other day, Business Anchors, with Dan and Lloyd Knowlton. If you've not heard of it, it's a fantastic podcast. And Dan's actually speaking at an event I'm running in Jersey in October called Greenhouse. Little plug, come along if you want to come. And they were talking about how lots of businesses in their marketing look for inspiration within their industry. But actually, why, if you're a tech company, why can't a health and wellness company give you inspiration? If you're a fitness firm, why couldn't a car ad be a great thing for you to think, oh my goodness, what about that? So we have to expand our thinking outside of our industry. And I think that's a really exciting thing. And after listening to that, I thought that's such a good point. And I often think about businesses that I see doing really well. And it's often businesses that are nothing like what I do, nothing like the industries we work in. One of them is Tala, I never know if I'm pronouncing it right, Grace Beverley's fitness wear company. The aesthetic's amazing. The product is great. That's the other thing. Marketing can't fix it. If the thing is shit that you're selling, no matter how good your brand and marketing is, once they get it, they'll never buy it again. And she's created a fantastic product, but she knows who her audience are and she knows why they want the thing. And they've created really fantastic marketing that really creates that lifestyle. And they've done that off the back of her being a founder who's very visible. And I think that more and more we're seeing brands where the founder becomes part of the brand in its own right. You know, Richard Branson did it years ago with Virgin. The whole reason that Virgin blew everyone's minds with their marketing was because they were just using his voice, right? And he became so well known and so synonymous with it. And more brands are going back to that. I love Beauty Pie. I think that they do really well. And again, MK, their founder, she does webinars and they've set her aside as an expert and she knows everything you need. So I think that they've nailed it. And then you look at other brands, don't you? Twitter, literally people left that platform because Elon Musk was involved in it. It's that founder story that goes alongside. And I think that a lot of founders, when they're starting, they build the brand and they forget that they have a separate thing to think about, which is how do you as a founder stand alone? When you get to the point of looking for investment, that becomes huge. But you need to start creating that foundation right from the beginning. Who am I as a founder and what is the business? And think about them as two separate things. I hate personal branding as a concept. It makes me feel a bit icky because I think there's too many gurus that talk about it. But fundamentally it's true. And the people that are nailing it and the people that teach it well know that at its heart it's about getting that symbiotic relationship between brand and founder is really important.
And I think we've actually touched on that in a couple of episodes. Sophie Meisenbaron talked about it when building Mama Made, and actually one of our recent guests, Abby, is a great example building Elent, and she is very much the person as an accountant who can give the financial advice, so she's at the heart of it. And I love the example of Beauty Pie as actually inspiration from other industries. It's a wholesale model that is most commonly seen in things like supermarkets, like Costco, wholesale buying. So great examples there. Okay, we have covered tips and tricks. We have covered your story, and we have to wrap up, but we might just have to get you back on because there's so much more still to ask about. 2 final questions. I want to ask about the thing that you're most proud of building as a founder and along your journey.
I think that I'm a big believer that you can't do anything on your own, and very much collaboration over competition. And I think the thing I'm most proud of is creating spaces where I can support, outside of what I do in my business, kind of keep that door open for other people that are wanting to learn or wanting to do more, whether that's supporting other founders in their journey, whether that's mentoring for startup organizations, whether that's creating spaces through Greenhouse where people can come together and see that you don't have to like be brandishing a business card every 5 minutes. I think that the further into business I get, the more I think about legacy and this idea of kind of, you know, if you were hit by a bus tomorrow, God, it's been morbid, hasn't it? I'm sorry. If you're hit by a bus tomorrow, what do you leave behind? Nobody's going to say, she was very good at marketing, that lady, or, you know, oh, she made a lot of money. They're going to say, oh, I met her at events and she was so nice, or like, you know, it was great when she did this thing or that thing. And I think that more and more I think about what's the life I want to build. And I think that when you're building a business, you can get a bit disconnected at the beginning because it becomes all about the end goal. But nobody cares what your website looks like, and nobody really cares how much cash you've got in the bank, right? It's about how you feel day to day living your life. I had a conversation with somebody that said yesterday that entrepreneurship is a series of awful things happening one after the other, and the people that make it through are the ones that succeed. And when he said it, I thought, I don't want that to be my life. I want my life to be about having a great time, meeting great people, learning loads, messing up all the time, getting stuff wrong. But it's a choice how you see that journey and whether you take people with you or whether you see it as a battle that has to be won. And I really think that we should be thinking more about it as an opportunity. And sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't, and that's okay too.
I love that. And what a beautiful lesson about entrepreneurship. I think the second way you described it is how most of us are choosing to kind of go after it. And I think you're right, it's a choice. Okay, final question. What is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Oh, that's a toughie. Best piece of advice I've ever received. I think it's about, actually, I know what it is. So back in my acting days, you're always taught that you never know who anyone is, right? And I see it a lot in business. There is an elitism sometimes to business. Who's important in the room, who's not. And I got an acting job once because I got to this audition and you sit around and lady checks you in. And there was a tea station and I made a cup of tea. And I said to the lady that was checking people in, would you like a cup of tea? She went, oh, that's nice. I'm like, well, I'm making one. So I made a cup of tea and I got chatting to her because you're bored. You're like sat there for an hour. And we got chatting. She was lovely. And I just chatted away to her for about an hour. And we auditioned and it was all very good. Anyway, I got the part. And on the first day of rehearsals, that lady was there. And it turns out she was the producer's wife. And he always had her do the checking in because he wanted to make sure that he wasn't hiring anyone that was going to be a nightmare to work with. So I think the biggest lesson for me is you should always treat everybody how you want to be treated, whether that's because one day you might need a job from them or whether it's because it's just the right thing to do, right? But it's that idea of making sure that everybody is respected and everybody, whether they're the person that's like running the business or first day newbie who doesn't have a clue what's going on, everyone is part of the journey. And I kind of live or die by that.
I love that. And actually, it's funny, I was talking to Abby just before we recorded last week about she was hiring for the first time, and she was saying she'd gone and spent a day, the first day of her new social media manager's first day at the job. She went and worked with her in a cafe near her house because she thought, I'd love it if a manager had done that for me the first time. So I love that idea of that deep empathy, treating others as they should be treated no matter what. And I think that makes a great leader as well. Jacqui, there's been so much, and I think we probably just need to do another one, but thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing. Loved it. And yeah, we need to do another one.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening. I really hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please do take a moment to rate and share. It really does make a huge difference to our growth. And for more founder oh shit moments, success stories, and the insights behind them both, do subscribe today. And for those of you curious what I get up to when not interviewing founders for this show, I have a new startup, If We Raise, aiming to get expertise and capital to underrepresented founders earlier. You can follow what my co-founder Tim and I are up to via @IfWeRaiseTogether on Instagram or @IfWeRaise on LinkedIn and Twitter. We'll be sharing our lessons learned along the way, as well as highlighting the incredible founders and angel investors joining the If We Raise journey. One of the most annoying things that can happen to any of us is getting cold outreach that feels like the company hasn't done any research on you. So it's no surprise that investors like outreach from founders that feels like they've actually researched them. That's why I was so excited when the founder of ShipShape.vc, Daniel, reached out to me about sponsoring this episode. ShipShape.vc is a search engine that's free for founders to use to find investors who have been sharing content that shows they're interested in startups like you. I've already been talking about ShipShape.vc on panels I've been on and to founders I coach, because I genuinely think it could be a massive game changer for startups. There's a link in the show notes to learn more if you're interested.